Greetings, Internet Faithful. This is some guy named Rob from On Your Marks Wrestling, and this is Rob Recaps Smash Wrestling for May the 31st, 2018. We open up the show with Daniel Garcia versus Sebastian Suave in a singles match. Before the match, Suave gets on the microphone and calls out Tarek, calling him a loser, and that people should be backing Sebastian Suave. We also get a little bit of a recap of various things, altercations that happened between Sebastian Suave and Tarek, most recently last week, where Tarek was cutting a promo backstage, and Sebastian Suave basically blindsided Tarek and then cut a PSH style promo, which was actually pretty entertaining. I have to say, Sebastian Suave plays a really great cocky heel. I'd like to see him get a little bit more. I'd like to see him move to maybe Impact or something like that. Get a little bit more of a bigger stage to work on to kind of show off what he can do. The match itself is actually pretty good. Sebastian Suave does control most of it, with Garcia getting in some really good sequences. One really great sequence was Garcia locking in a guillotine-style submission hold, but Suave is able to power out of it just enough to counter it into a brutal-looking spinebuster. Suave, of course, uses his heel tactics, using a thumb to the eye to basically set up his finisher, called the Stamp of Approval. Now, depending on your frame of reference, you might also recognize this as looking a lot like the Gravy Train or White Noise, depending on your level of fandom. After the match, Tarek hits the ring and administers a very sound beatdown to Suave after an initial flurry of offense by Sebastian Suave, and Tarek hits two backpack stunners, leaving Sebastian Suave completely laid out in the ring. I really liked this match. It wasn't as good as the Suave Tarek match from a couple weeks ago, which was like a 20 to 25 minute affair with zero rest holds. But considering how green Daniel Garcia seems to be, he is a fairly new wrestler. He was able to carry his own pretty well, and overall the match was pretty entertaining. We then get to a recap of the Muscle getting fired by Kevin Bennett a couple weeks ago. Then we move to a Kevin Bennett promo backstage, which was really, really weak. He's not entertaining on the mic. He's not an especially good talker, which isn't good because a lot of his gimmick involves him doing a lot of talking. But anyway, hopefully things improve. Maybe it was just an off night. We then follow this up with a look at the round one matches for the Northern Tournament coming up this June. That eats through a couple minutes as there are quite a few matches over the 2 days. And that will bring us to our main event. Cody Deaner and Tyson Dukes versus the SSB, Evil Uno and Stu Grayson. Deaner and Dukes dominate very early. SSB stay in it using dirty tactics, pulling down the ropes so that way the faces go through them into the floor, spilling to the floor. A ton of brawling on the outside of the ring and through the crowd for the early part of the match. The referee could have legitimately counted to 50, if not higher. Although it did turn into a very entertaining spot where both Dukes and Deaner were taking turns kind of one-upping each other on how hard and how much damage they could deliver to the members of SSB, with some synchronized head slams into the ring apron, followed by going out into the crowd and sort of sitting them down in fan seats while they stood over them and just kind of punched them. Eventually, the tables turned with this really dive out of completely out of nowhere by Stu Grayson. He just kind of flew off the ramp into Cody Deaner, and then Evil Uno managed to isolate Tyson Dukes, taking him up the ramp and administering a pretty brutal looking tombstone pile driver. From here, SSB basically double teamed Deaner with tons and tons of near falls. Deaner gets a hero spot, but there's no one to tag to. Dukes is literally crawling back to the ring, and finally the hot tag is made. The faces make a really big comeback. There's a really great spot where Deaner is holding Stu Grayson in a headlock and runs forward with him and administers a running clothesline to Evil Uno, so it turns into a running clothesline bulldog combination, which I thought was a pretty great move. The heels do get back into it again, using sort of a combination of heel tactics and the fact that they had just spent the better half of 10 minutes beating the ever-loving crap out of the faces. It turns into an all-out four-man brawl and eventually ends with Deaner and Dukes hitting dual DDTs to pick up the victory. This match was chaotic, and it was it stretched the bounds of suspension of disbelief that a referee would allow a contest to go on this long without ringing the bell and stopping the match. In fact, it's even brought up in the commentary that the referee should probably stop the match. But overall, the spots themselves were quite entertaining, and I had a lot of fun watching this. Hopefully, we'll get to see where this goes. Tyson Dukes is still sort of in his hunt to get back into a title match versus the Beast King. And of course, the members of Malice, including the SSB, are going to be throwing obstacles in his way. So overall, entertaining show. Definitely not as insulting to the intelligence as something like the non-heel turn to Nia Jax, suddenly becoming this gigantic heel turn and turning into a heel promo spot. And also, there was none of that pointless matchness of it all that happened on NXT with the women's title match. And overall, I have to say I was pretty entertained for my hour. Other than Kevin Bennett, that man needs some work. Maybe needs a little bit of tuning up. Definitely needs a mouthpiece that can speak, even though the whole purpose of his gimmick is he's a rapper, producer, etc., professional wrestler. It's a little sad. It's very early John Cena type sad, and yeah, it's not pretty. It really isn't pretty. Anyway, that's it for this week. We will see you next week, where we will recap yet another episode of Smash Wrestling. Until then, take it easy.